Why don't we,
So do you want me to take the minutes this time?
sure, if you are so inclined. So this is a meeting of the working group drafting a proposal for the Zoning Revisions Committee. And we have, after 4 or 5 meetings, come up with a rough draft, I shall call it. And what we're going to do for this afternoon's meeting, for which we have 1 hour to do our work, I believe, we're going to walk through, probably make proposals, clean it up, and then decide whether or not we're going to meet again before the 28th, or if what we end with today is what will be brought before the planning board
That makes sense.
on the 28th. We can get a better sense, okay? So, first paragraph is establishment purpose. For the sake of our people who are watching Adam's footage, should we read through it? Would that be helpful, or?
I can reproduce this on the website.
Okay.
Whatever will be efficient for you. Yeah.
That would be most efficient if that could be like a text that people could follow our discussion with. So in that first paragraph, are there any questions, suggestions, concerns?
This is my second trip up to Northampton for meetings today. I went to the EDLU meeting this afternoon.
Okay.
And there was concern about the issue of this, in the language here that says that the committee is charged with implementing, making recommendations that support the sustainability plan. There were questions around the table about how do we control that process, and in fact, should we have some language in the purpose that would in fact require a commitment on the part of members of this committee to support the sustainability plan. And I think the concern was that there's a perception that there are those waiting in the wings for an opportunity to attempt to either change or even deep six the sustainability plan.
Okay. Well, having heard that, let's go through here. First of all, I mean, as it's made clear on a couple of different occasions here, this is a subcommittee of the planning board. And the last I was aware is that EDLU was a subcommittee of the ordinance committee. So I don't know how that group could, you use the word control. I really think that
This is what we're working on.
I really think the control of this group is for the planning board. I mean, that's the first thing, just so having said that,
I promised the group I'd
I
pass
heard
along the concerns
Yeah.
to the meeting this evening. I mentioned that we would be meeting today at 5
Okay.
and invited them to attend.
that was an item on their agenda then.
It was.
Yeah. And no, I think that we clearly talked about the last time, is that this is a subcommittee of and controlled by the planning board, so that what happens is everything is funneled back through the planning board. They make recommendations, this group makes recommendations to the planning board, and it does not have a life of its own or authority of its own other than a report back to the planning board.
I mentioned that too, and
Right.
there was a level of comfort with that.
So the, and some of the words that I circled, and for the sake of the folks who just joined us, this is the draft that George did for us that came out of last week's meeting. And we've just started walking through this and looking at the language to see if there's changes or clarifications that we want to make. And we do have this room for an hour, so we're going to be very kind of task-oriented. And in terms of public comment, what I would say is if you have something to say as we're moving through this, feel free to do it at that time. You know, just if there's something that I think needs to be, you could flag a concern or something. So on the third, one of the words I circled, third sentence, first word, is to ensure. And it goes sort of like with what David just said about this committee does not really have any authority of its own. So to me, the word ensure may be a little bit out of place, because ensure means to make sure that it happens, right? And in this context, I mean, I just don't want to, I mean, this is more of an advisory committee, so I would say assist and advise, or insist, and maybe there's a different word than ensure.
What about just assist, which is to assist the city?
Okay,
Or to assist the planning board.
and then that would be the better of the planning board.
Yeah, and that way
It's very clear of
that
what
it's a,
and in that list of adjectives there, identify, develop, and revise. Identify and revise are clear enough to me. But does develop imply that they would actually be writing it when you read that word? Because I think we talked about how they wouldn't necessarily be the writers. That in fact, they may get written in-house. First paragraph, under establishment and purpose. So,
how about turn revise to recommend?
to identify, revise, and recommend.
Mhm.
Okay. And for the next sentence, I have to say that it says appropriate zoning ordinances that serve to implement the sustainability plan. I don't know how much clearer you could get.
Yeah.
That is, you know, it's not guaranteeing that they're all gonna get passed, but the focus of this is for the implementation of the sustainability plan. And at least for the goals of it.
I guess the next step would be the pledge allegiance to Sustainable Northampton.
Have it
To the
passed
sustainability plan or to the planning board?
Have it build a plan. Anything else in that first paragraph?
Comment.
Yes.
In the sustainability plan, it speaks a lot about referencing the map, you know, the area of infill and that boundary line and stuff. And that maybe you want to have that language as part of that there somewhere.
Well, the map is a part of the plan,
Mhm.
Right?
so I think when we mention the plan, I think it's
Okay.
implied that it's all inclusive, would be my understanding, because that's what was adopted. So, I mean, I could reference it, but when it
All right,
says,
all right.
okay, any,
Well, if we reference one section of it,
Well,
then
that was my
by, you know, we omit other sections, it doesn't, it's not a good idea, I don't think. We gotta keep to the whole thing.
Refer to it as one.
One reference, yeah.
and then there is that sentence that clearly says, again, that the committee shall be organized as a subcommittee of the planning board, and its charge is threefold. And then as we move down to that list, it's the three charges, is to review and revise, to serve as a resource, and to encourage and provide forums. All responsibility, very little power. Adam.
If we can just touch on serve to implement the goals of the sustainability plan just for a minute. I can easily see reasonable people sincerely wanting to support the sustainability plan and having opposite directions. For example, plot of land within half a mile of downtown. Some people might say there should be housing there because you can walk to downtown. Other people might say that's appropriate for a home garden, and if we leave it, as dirt, then water will soak into it and it's flood mitigation. So they both think they're serving sustainability. Does this capture that? How do you
I
express
think
that?
it does. I think that's where the implementation come in, is that what does it mean? I think in any big study with broad goals, when you get to implement, then you have to sort that out. So but my understanding is that's exactly what this committee would wrestle with and make some recommendations.
And ultimately be the responsibility of the planning board to make a decision on it.
And then further down the line, the council to actually make the changes, so
Right.
that this is round 1, round 2, round 3, so that there would be a lot of public process before anything would ever wind up.
Right.
And that's one thing, that we should look hard at any reference here to ordinance, because at the level of this working group, it's not an ordinance. It may get crafted into being an ordinance when it hits the planning board, but at this level, it's not an ordinance. And I think at this level, having it an ordinance would be kind of threatening to the people in the process, because this really is think tank time.
Right.
This is formative. It's not as scary as an ordinance till it gets to planning board, and planning board says, let's craft it into an ordinance.
And that's sort of why I backed away
Yeah.
from develop,
Yeah.
because it had that kind of feel to it.
Two things. One, with that in mind, you may want to change this first bullet to review and revise, since you seem to be being very careful not to give this committee any actual power, to review and revise as appropriate current zoning ordinance language instead of the way you have it there, so that they're basically there to craft the words. The committee and
Yeah,
the
the
city,
concepts.
the council actually does anything that,
Right.
but they just,
Well, the planning board.
The planning board would.
and secondly these 3 bullets only talk about current things, and it was my impression that the charge from the plan was to develop, again, language for new ordinances as useful, and I didn't know if you wanted to put that in here, that
The second bullet, to serve as an additional technical resource to the planning board in matters of zoning revisions. We could certainly expound on the second half of that sentence to open the door for potential new zoning language or new zoning.
I mean, it's been,
Well, that's what revisions and
Right.
stuff.
Well, actually, that's a great point, because in, under the powers, duties, and functions, the first one, A, not that I want to get ahead of us, but it does say that, about the middle, if new ordinances are deemed necessary to advise and assist the planning board in the formulation of these ordinances to achieve the city's sustainability and land use goals. So clearly it was intended.
Right.
So we might want to just make a note that recommending new, because it does seem like it's just to
it does
review and
say that.
revise. Okay.
We've discussed now for the past couple of years, implementing a form-based zoning code.
right.
So, we haven't worked much on it because we haven't had time to do it, but that may come out of this process.
Okay, that's fine. It's just
Yeah, because certainly
language here.
that's an issue that's open.
Yeah.
Because you may revise zoning if you're simply changing density tables or frontage requirements, but you may,
Throw the whole book out.
could redo the whole thing. I mean, over time.
And just for a footnote, the design forum that's going to be coming up in September may have a lot to do with that type of zoning. I
Right.
understand that that's something that they.
The form-based.
The form-based,
Right.
yeah. So that would be a good way for people to learn a little bit more about that and what that might mean for downtown, for Northampton in general. The third bullet, it says to encourage and provide forums for public input to the zoning revision process. And there's something about that for me, just falls a little bit short of I think that's more an example of to ensure that there is public input. You know, the public forums are one of the ways that we ensure that there's public input. It's not limited to that. And so I would want a little bit more of a kind of maybe a broader or stronger, and I didn't come up with wording, but if I can find it, I mean, there's one of the main goals of the sustainability plan. Let's see if I can find it now. Was to increase public involvement. And I flagged it in my other copy of the sustainability plan, so it's not popping out
Well,
at me.
what if it just said to encourage opportunities for public input? And it would be open-ended as to what those opportunities should have. Forums, writings,
And if we,
blogs, whatever.
what if we say to encourage a wide range of opportunities for public, okay? Because I really see that as one of the main reasons why this is
Okay, a wide range of opportunities for.
to encourage, yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if the folks who arrived after we started a discussion came, but Ken was reporting on how he was at a meeting of the EDLU committee earlier today. Did you hear those concerns? Okay. And the EDLU committee, or some of its members, expressed concerns that there may be some folks who get on this committee that would in fact use it to undermine the goals of the sustainability plan?
Yeah, I guess the general feeling is that we have a sustainability plan that's been approved by the planning board, the city council, and it was a lot of work. And this was a 3-year process, and it involved a lot of people. And we don't want to now encourage a process that throws that out and starts the process all over again. We want to build on that.
So in response to that concern, David and I pointed out that this in fact is, first of all, the subcommittee of the planning board, and doesn't really have any authority of its own. And then we referred to some of the wording in it, and I think that's where you walked in. So that explains the tone of the remarks, because there are some who are concerned that this may be used for its own purposes.
But that in mind, to echo Adam's feeling, you know, there may be people that have 180-degree different positions on things.
Sure.
That they think they're very clear this way or that way. So, you know, they may end up discussing things that one person reads one way and one reads another, not throwing out the plan with the bathwater. It just means different things to different people, and that's got to get worked out. Its goals could be accomplished more than one way. I think the original version, it contradicted itself a great deal. You know, things were good here and bad there in the same plan.
Here's the paragraph I was looking for under the vision for the sustainability plan: inclusiveness, tolerance, and civic mindedness by embracing diversity and encouraging full participation in community conversations. It's assumed that controversy and debate will only further the discussion and result in greater participation and ownership by the community. And I really think that's what needs to be reflected in this, you know, that, because this is one of the main ways, I think. And I think this should be anchored in this. So, and I just wanted that paragraph to be a little bit more, and I'll work on the wording a little bit more. Moving forward, under membership, it says, committee shall consist of 9 voting members. Residents of the city shall be appointed by the planning board, and the composition shall be as followed: 3 appointees that have technical skills and experience to address zoning, land use and planning issues. 3 appointees representing, will represent broad-based community interests, and it gives examples. 1 member representing environmental conservation interests, and 1 appointee representing economic development interests, and then 1 member representing the planning board. The voting members shall serve without compensation. Any comments on any of those?
That seems to
Reflect what we did.
reflect the spirit of what we talked about.
The only thing that I would just flag, and for want of a better term perhaps, is interest. At least when it comes to conservation and economic development, interest is always seems a little self-serving, and maybe it is by nature. But I don't know, it's just,
What about concerns rather than interests?
I like that, concerns. And real estate doesn't have to be capitalized, I believe, right?
Nor does the Chamber of Commerce does.
Chamber does, yes.
It does, but not real estate.
So I have a quick comment.
Yes.
Thank you. No, based on some of the recommendations that we had been making, clearly you were listening, and thank you.
Well, I mean, that's something that we were concerned about for this group to have credibility. It has to be inclusive, and we certainly, I think, want to protect certain interests so they don't not get appointed and represented, so I think.
Well, for my organization, Ward 3 Neighborhood Association, we're very happy with. So, thanks.
And again,
I'm not sure how often you hear that.
Well, this group, I think, is the first time.
You're speechless.
And I do want to go back to the paragraph I quoted, because I think is really rooted in the spirit of that. And
That I want to put that on a function key in my computer, so that
Yeah.
just come up whenever I
Cut
need.
and paste.
Put that baby right in there.
And then it says the Director of Planning and Development and the Building Commissioner or their designees shall be ex officio staff. Is that a real term? I heard of ex officio members, but not ex officio staff. I think we can leave out ex officio there, can't we? Shall be staff.
Well, we can put that in there. I don't know if either of them have consented to do that.
Yeah, really.
Or their designees. Yeah, we can leave it in there. They'll have to.
Well, why don't we
when-
change staff to members, as you suggested?
Or what?
Or
Or to members?
Yeah.
Okay, ex officio members, then, okay. But not,
they're not to establishment, they're not going to poison the spirit of this, are they?
she shall not be entitled to vote on the making of recommendations to be included in reports.
Or are they resources?
Well, I think that's, but they're not entitled to vote on the making of recommendations. Can we just have a period there? I don't think we need the rest of that. And
Yeah.
I was shying away from decisions because it seems to imply that they have decisions that can't be overturned. But,
No, I think it's important that we do at least reference them so that, because they definitely have knowledge, experience, and a role to play as a resource to the group. But it is, not in the decision-making, but as a resource.
filling vacancies, that's pretty straightforward, I think.
We never really worked out, Wayne was pretty slippery about the staffing of this. They're all very sensitive to that. Do we
Yeah.
want them to have a recording secretary of their own, somebody on the committee that's,
Well, they'll have some responsibility to do that if they're holding public meetings.
yes. So do we want to add a chair, vice chair, and a secretary,
Well, there is mention of
so that they deal with that responsibility? and
there
not
is
just-
organization in offices. But-
No, that's where I was
But I think staffing is definitely something that should be addressed. I don't, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just,
Do you have a recommendation?
no, I don't. I was just thinking that I don't want to leave them feeling like they can just expect city staff to do it for them all the time, because we don't have that commitment, and I don't think we got that commitment. Wayne was sort of wishy-washy on that one. Yeah, we'll do what we can, but do we want to, in their organization, say that they will have that responsibility themselves? And
I'd rather they just comply with whatever the requirements are for public meetings and leave it at that. However they want to do it. Maybe I'll chip in and hire somebody.
So we can leave that as something we'll have to revisit. I mean, ultimately, if there is staffing, it'll have to come out of Wayne's.
well, yeah, absolutely, and I don't know whether because it's an entity of the planning board, I don't know. Carolyn staffs planning board, right? So.
Right. I know that they don't have a lot of time to deal with this stuff. They've been creating committees lately that have no staffing at all. I'm on the tree committee and we do everything. Writing meeting minutes, posting them, getting arrangements for the,
How about this committee?
well, there you go.
You don't have to go far afield. Okay, so for organization and offices, then other than the question around staffing.
And I mean, that's certainly, I mean, we're kind of like this committee, we're making a recommendation to the planning board, but you all at the planning board can decide if, you know, because if you're discussing it there, Carolyn will be in the hot seat because she'll be there, so you can always say, you're gonna cover this for us, or do we have to do it within?
My guess is they won't. They can't. So it'll be up to the committee to figure that out.
The one thing I would suggest is having a paragraph there between the first two sentences, between the offices and the subcommittees, just so that's clear that it's under organization and offices. Okay, and then it allows them to establish subcommittees, and they have to work within the open meeting law.
What's with 2-year terms and
Yeah,
elections
that's what I-
annually? That looks a little goofy.
We don't know how long this committee is going to
Yeah.
exist.
Well, one of the things that I wrote is that there was no sunset clause as we spoke, so last week. We could put in for 1-year terms, or do you want them indefinitely?
We might just say, leave out the term amount, but I think it would be good to reference that the life of the committee is at the whim of the planning board, because they are a creature of the planning board, and you can keep them or call their job done as you wish.
I really think it's helpful to have a term in there, because it's very, I think, difficult for a committee once it gets started to decide when you have people already in there as chair, as vice chair, there should be a limit.
Well,
And then need for an election, so.
Well, I'd take the term out and just say elections will be annual.
Okay.
To serve
And delete the.
for 2 years and just say
For
elections
2
will be
years.
annually, and then. they
So
have-
members of the committee shall elect annually. One member, okay.
Suggestion? Because I think there will be a sunset to this, and that also recommending that whoever is serving, that the idea is that they would fulfill whatever that term is within, the hopes would be that you wouldn't want an entire turnover, or even a turnover, I think, of anybody would be difficult on this committee, in that, there's gonna be an assumption of some catch-up for the non-zoning types, and for them to get
Mhm.
Well, I don't think we're talking about redoing the whole committee, this is the election
Just
of the
the
vice
officers.
chair and chair.
Well, I know, we're not, but I'm just saying that in terms of having the idea of that the committee members will probably be re-upped through the duration of the committee, that the commitment isn't a one-year commitment. It would be to, you know, it may be a 1 year, may be done after a year, but that the hope is that they will stick around for the whole thing.
And the officers, well, I've been on a number of committees where there's an election annually, but once the committee's up and running, if it's working well, people tend to say that, you know, this is working, you know, God bless you, you can keep doing the extra work and be chair or whatever. And if it's not working, then there's usually greater problems than who's involved. But it did seem a little weird to have 2-year terms and annual elections, so that's all I wanted to bring to people's attention.
Yeah, and I think the 1 year makes sense, but having that inevitable sunset and that members are gonna be asked to fulfill that whole, you know, the hope is they could fulfill that whole term. Have it in there, that's all.
That might be something we want to just put in there for other recommendations of the planning board, is try and get a handle on how long you want this relationship to go on when you actually act on these recommendations and decide, you know, is it our goal that this is going to be done within a year or two, and, you know, when we're getting volunteers, because you're going to be getting volunteers, we're looking for a 2-year commitment here. We don't think it's going to take that long, but, you know, once you get started, we'd like you to stick with it for at least that long.
Right.
And I mean, that's kind of a discussion that you should have there as the appointing authority for this, to say, you know, we want you to volunteer and we may need you for this long.
Yeah. You can put it on the application.
Right, that's sort of like your commitment. And I think one of the advantage to this, as opposed to say like the Community Preservation Committee, where most of the members on there are by design members of other committees. So those folks have a lot of other meetings and responsibilities. We're not requiring of this of anybody except perhaps the planning board person. So hopefully they could get people who have a little bit more time and flexibility. So that's one of the things that looks attractive to this section. Moving on to meetings, quorums, that's all seem pretty boilerplate language. Powers, duties, and functions. Let's go through one at a time. A.
Well, I agree with the recommendation you made a few weeks ago, that powers could be deleted. Duties and functions covers.
Just, I forgot to turn my phone off, but it did tell me we've got about 15 minutes left in the room, so.
Actually, when they were going over the calendar, I thought he said 6:30. I never reached it. Not that I want to stay that long, but
We can stay until he throws out.
yeah, well, no, that won't look good on film.
Take the thing out, oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's
Abusing
call
our
it
free
duties,
space, yeah.
duties and functions. And under A, so the committee shall recommend changes, additions, deletions. So again, the additions instead of entries. So that seems to be pretty all-encompassing. A.
It's got the A word, the additions word.
Yeah. B, will develop an annual priority list. Proposal to be revised in a time.
And that was our prioritizing things.
That's actually been a goal in planning for years. That's probably what George was thinking when he put that in. Maybe we get some of this work done by somebody else.
And does annual make sense to include that there? I mean, I don't know how long this committee is going to, what people have in mine, I've heard 2 years, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might wanna take out annual,
to,
yeah, I agree with that.
develop periodically a priority list,
A priority list,
develop a
Yeah.
priority list.
because I think that's kind of up to the planning board to set the pace.
Right.
Because with everything coming back to you, the planning board's gonna wanna be able to take things in stride with its other work, so.
The committee shall serve as a vehicle for continuous, regular input for the residents of the community in relation to the process of drafting zoning revisions that further the goals of the Northampton Sustainability Plan.
It's kind of an aggressive process for having no budget.
It is. Do we need to list all of those things?
Under D, you're looking at?
Yeah.
Public participation in the process might be,
Well,
And
they could serve as examples by, I don't know if that's necessarily a checklist, but we could have language by including use of the following or something like that. But I do think there needs to be a clear indication that there is no one way that you can reach a wide range of citizens. Doing it in the newspaper it doesn't work.
I might take out newspaper, radio, and television and just say using publicity, surveys, informational meetings, public hearings.
Or media.
Media,
Local
media.
Local media.
I'm gonna write in the Bill DeWhite show. Give him a plug, see if we can get some action for Bill.
You would appreciate that.
Yeah.
The committee shall have the power to create ad hoc committees, and so that's like the third time that that's been mentioned. That's well for carrying the purposes. I don't know if such ad hoc committees may be comprised of committee or non-committee individuals.
Is that redundant or?
I don't think it's redundant, but I don't think it's.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if this is a recommendation.
Of all those, that's the one that bothers me the most. I don't know why we have to have it in there at all.
E?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why does it bother you in terms?
I guess it doesn't bother me, it just seems, I guess it seems
Redundant.
Yeah, the committee, the power to create ad hoc committees and task forces.
Well,
Try carrying this, I mean,
it
again,
is.
it's like.
It is boiplate, and of many other ordinances
it?
you create. Yeah. Because if you don't include that, then the assumption is that a committee does not have the authority to create.
It's not implied.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's typically why it's included. And then it has to be mentioned if these people can be non-committee members, so a committee could have a working group or a subcommittee.
I see.
I mean, I'd be interested in in fact, I would be very interested in what the planning board as a whole feels about our recommendation to them, so.
I would, under F, is it necessary for them to go back and take any rules and regulations to the planning board? I mean, that's a little cumbersome sometimes.
I think so too. Micromanaging.
Yeah, they're given a charge, it's like, I don't know what kind of rules, I mean, they can't give themselves any more power than they have in here. So it's just to do for implementing, so I would suggest delete subject to the approval of the planning board. Because I just think it makes it very cumbersome.
I think he probably put that in there because we talked so much about tying the authority for this through the planning board, that's probably what I went up.
And then there is no reference to a sunset clause here. We had talked about that a little bit. And what it sunset clause has done in a couple of cases is saying this will expire in 3 or 5 years from the point of passage, unless it is ratified again by the planning board. So if they wanted to continue it, they could, and it just forces the issue of saying, okay, let's look at it, let's review it, let's evaluate it, maybe we need to tweak it, or maybe we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I could see sunset by ordinance, but perhaps that's something we want to, that we put in sunset clause question mark and leave it up to the planning board to decide, since it's their subcommittee, so to speak, how they want to deal. We recommend them that they do deal with the concept at the planning board level, and say, don't, decide how, if you want to give this a term up front, or if you just want to be aware of the fact that, when you're done with it, it can go away. Yeah, we should.
Not to sound impatient, but I would hope that within a couple of years, we will have dealt with these issues of zoning changes related to the sustainability.
Well, if there's a sunset clause in there of like 3 years, it does sort of imply that this is the time frame you have to get your work done. For example, the best practices has to deliver a report. It's not a sunset clause per se, but and after delivering the report, that's it. But there is sort of an implied timeline. Okay, here's our endpoint. Then we got to work backwards to make sure we, meet all these steps so we can. So.
Yeah.
But if we were to define that, say that in 2 years, we want to review this process. If in 2 years we're not making any progress on this, then we ought to try something different. If in 2 years we're close to concluding the process and we need another year, then we could do that. It just seems like 2 years is what I was thinking of in terms of this. It took us almost 3 years to get the sustainability plan together. And I would like to see ordinance changes come out of this thing in the next couple of years.
Because clearly it should stay in place as long as it is a valuable resource to the planning board.
Yeah.
If it's done in 2 years, then the planning board should know we're going to pull a plug on it in 2 years. If it's at 2 years and it's almost done, you keep it going until it's done. But I think we should clearly vest the authority in the planning board to decide when its useful life is over.
Yeah, I guess I'm just suggesting that we put the sunset clause in here as, I don't know, in the beginning of the thing, or,
I think it's appropriate to have it at the end.
yeah.
Yep. And just under a heading of sunset clause and saying, recommending that this committee will conclude its work within 2 years unless the planning board decides to continue. Okay, and that makes it, kind of focused.
And I agree for focus, but
And again, we're looking for a response from the planning board.
and also some sort of scope for potential members to know, this isn't a 6-month commitment, it's 2 years is long enough that they'll feel like they really have to make the commitment, and then the job's almost done, it's not mandatory. But.
One last round for comment.
Deadlines are good.
I think they are too.
Yeah.
Even if you don't meet them, there's the opportunity to extend it if that makes sense.
Okay. So are we going to meet again on this, or do we want to pass on the changes to George and have George go before the planning board on the 28th? Is that, do I have the right date? Is that the day?
Do you think we're?
I think so. I think this is pretty good.
Okay. And it's a rough draft and we want it, so should we pick then a date after the 28th?
Yeah, that would make
Probably
sense.
should do that. Okay. census committee coming to our conclusion. Okay, so.
And that would be dependent on what happens on the 28th, right?
Yeah, I assume that there may be some recommendations on this from the planning board. You're saying if there aren't, then we're
Yes,
set.
that the planning board, unanimously breaks into kumbaya and starts dancing around, I think we're done.
Could happen.
You never know. If not, if they want something from us, I'd be happy to get together again.
And there's no need to meet with them at this point in time. We don't need, George is gonna present and then we'll come back in here.
Yeah, and I'll be there too.
Okay. The first is Labor Day, 1st of September, so we're looking at the next, keeping on Mondays, is the 8th. I do have a meeting at 6, so I may not be able to stay terribly long after that. But I'm willing to make 5 o'clock on Monday, September 8th. And we would need someone to make reservations here to see if we could hold this.
I'll look into that.
Maybe can even do it on the way out. I don't know.
And again, this is subject to what happens on the 28th.
Right. But it's probably best to have something on board.
That date's in the middle of the design forum. I don't know if that is a problem or not.
What time were those gonna start in the evening?
That's a
Wasn't
good
it
question. I'm
7?
not exactly sure.
It's ongoing too.
It's
I
all
think
week,
there's
yeah.
a 6 and then there's a light or something like that. Actually, I don't have that folder in front of me.
I can't remember. I might have it.
It is the middle of the design week. Is that
You
Well,
have it?
but the other thing-
Oh.
Seeing if I have it from Paradise.
the other thing is that it's also the beginning of the design week. It's like the first day that
Yeah.
we design, quite frankly. And we're talking about an hour meeting. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for people. If we kept it from 5 to 6, people could go in after that or.
And all day of meetings.
I don't think it's going to be a problem because
Yeah.
we don't know that the planning board's actually going to ask us for any more
Exactly.
input they would say.
Okay.
Well, it starts on the 7th.
Sunday?
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But the evening meetings that are scheduled for that week, do they start at 6 or 7?
It starts on the 7th with the public forums. The working days start on the 8th, I believe.
Senior Center. Looks like they're meeting at 4 p.m. at the Senior Center.
On Sunday.
Thank you.
They have the meetings
Well, it says
downtown.
through Saturday, so they're opening on Sunday and then meet daily through Saturday. Does this sound right?
Yeah, but they're only, the Sunday and the Saturday ones are at the senior center, and during the week, they're working out of the APE space. And there are drop-in opportunities during the day,
Okay.
and then there are a couple of set times at the day, and I think it's like 4 and 7 or something like that, where they will be having a little bit more organized feedback than just drop-in.
Right.
That's the last of
I'm trying to
my
read
understanding.
quickly through this. That sounds accurate.
Okay.
Just like
I
it's a
think
lot.
we're fine. I think if we do this for one, if we do it for a quick hour, I think we're fine. Well, there's a light at the end of the tunnel there.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
you.
Seriously.
The next time this will appear will be when George and Ken present it to the planning board on the 28th
Okay.
at some point.
Is there gonna be time for public comment for that, or do you guys wanna?
That's a planning board thing.
I don't know.
I mean, chances are that
I think if
I wanna
someone's
say
there,
something like this looks really good, we like it.
I think if somebody's
You don't
there,
wanna hear us.
or a few people are there that wanna, I don't know what the agenda is the issue.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe Carolyn oftentimes attaches these things at the end of the agenda. If we've got a busy night, we could be taking it up at 11:15.
I think George mentioned last time or sometime that the reason why they said the 28th because it was a light agenda. I could be
Okay.
wrong on that, and maybe the agenda has changed since then. But
Yeah.
I think at one point in time, that was the reason for looking at the 28th. I thought that worked.
Yeah, if you have public hearings or something, that sort of controls the
Yeah.
flow of things. If you post it, we're gonna do this at this time.
The
Yeah, that
public
actually-
hearings, it could often be on the 29th.
But that sounds right, I think that is true. I'm sure if somebody has something to say, we don't usually,
Okay, well,
we're a user-friendly group.
okay.
Contrary to what many think.
Right, so we are officially adjourned, right? Gentlemen, thank you.